Here we go. NFL draft season. More prospects for the San Francisco 49ers. Pick 31, pick 63. Not at all, maybe. Ladd McConkey, wide receiver from Georgia. Braden Fiske, defensive tackle from Florida State. And Mike Sainristil, he's a cornerback out of Michigan. Are they future San Francisco 49ers? Next.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Crocky209 at Crocky209 at BD Peacock. Appreciate everybody jumping in with me and Croc every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You know the score. Eric Crocker over here. You didn't see him dancing while the music was playing there. He is pumped up for this one. We got three prospects, I think, on different levels of how excited we are about these guys. And we don't share a lot of notes before we go live, but there's a little bit of note sharing going on. And it's going to be a lot of fun talking about these prospects for the San Francisco 49ers, potential future 49ers on today's episode, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And you tweeted about it a little bit earlier tonight, previewing this episode, talking about Ladd McConkey, wide receiver out of Georgia. And he's a guy that blew up the combine, Croc. He showed off some quicks at the combine, showed off some speed at the combine. He shows off a lot of quicks and speed on tape as well. He is a white wide receiver, letting the cat out of the bag for those people who haven't watched Ladd McConkey, which means he's going to get
listen to the name.
He's going to get the.
You're not seeing too many brothers with the name Ladd McConkey.
That's true. Not many Ladds or McConkeys. There was a former McConkey in the NFL. I'm not sure if there's any relation actually to Ladd McConkey, but he was also extremely pale, as is Ladd McConkey. But he's a ball player, Croc, and maybe get the white wide receiver discount on Ladd McConkey. But he is not Wes Welker. I want to say that up front. He is not slot only, although, Croc, he's a guy that if you're a team that features the slot, I'd put him out there because he can go win and he can make some plays. What did you see watching wide receiver Ladd McConkey on tape?
So first, real quick, we got to address the production. And I don't even know what his numbers are, but I know they're probably not great because Georgia, they just don't lean on throwing the ball a whole lot. Matter of fact, I'd say they probably threw the ball more this year than they have in any of the previous seasons. But even then, it's still not at the same influx as a lot of the other programs around college football. So I don't even know what his stats are, but I'd assume not amazing. And I would say when you are evaluating Ladd McConkey, I would say throw the receptions, yards, touchdowns, throw that away. And we're just going to talk about ability and what he potentially can bring to an offense. And a lot of times you come out, Peacock, you say your one word scouting phrase for this player. And my one word, or it might be two words because it's a name, Brandon Cooks. He when I was watching him, I was like, okay, there's a little stiffness to him, right? And that's fine. Just a little stiffness with how he moves. And I'm watching, I'm like, gosh, he reminds me of someone. And then I get to watching him and how he works guys in space and just the speed, getting on guys' toes, putting defensive backs in a panic. I mean, you're 8 yards off. He's closing that space immediately. And you see guys want to start to kind of open up, right? And I'm watching that. He has two-way goes. He's beating guys. It doesn't matter if he's outside, if he's in the slot. Then I started seeing some fluidness to him. He was able to move well at the line of scrimmage. He was beating press. There was someone that said, are you guys hearing that he can't beat press? We saw that on Twitter. And at least in the games that I watched, beating press didn't seem like an issue. But I always try to envision a guy in the 49ers offense because that's kind of why we're evaluating a lot of these prospects. And I would say he might be too fast for the 49ers current situation.
Speed. But Croc, he's got that tasty 3-cone, which I think puts him in the good graces of Kyle Shanahan. And a couple of weeks ago, I put out a tweet. I named 3 guys. I did this a few years ago. We were both on Deebo Samuel. We knew 49ers were going to be into Deebo Samuel. They coached him at the Senior Bowl, so that was not a difficult one to predict. But I put out 3 names that I thought the San Francisco 49ers were going to be interested in wide receiver in 2020. Brandon Ayuk was one of those 3 names. I thought the 49ers would like Van Jefferson. He actually ended up going to Sean McVay in the Rams in that draft. And this year, Malachi Corley and Ladd McConkey were 2 of the 3. I think Ricky Pearsall was the 3rd I had up there. But I think this is a guy that Kyle Shanahan is going to love. He's going to be a Kyle Shanahan wide receiver. Shout out to Steph, who's I see her in the chat. She knows who all of the prospects the 49ers have met with, and I would love to hear from her right now. Since she's in the chat, if she's listening, and you got to check out 49K. Are these 3 prospects on the list of prospects that the 49ers have met with or having 30 visits? Yeah, that would be interesting. I do think Ladd McConkey is a player that Kyle Shanahan would love. When I put on the tape, I saw a guy who, you know what's funny is the stiffness is aesthetic, Croc. The stiffness isn't in how he moves. You know, does that make sense? He looks stiff until he breaks you off, right? Right. And so he's a savvy route runner with quicks, and he's got deep speed on top of the short area quicks, which I think is huge for Ladd McConkey. That's what separates him from someone who's like, you know, one of these short, just slot only guys. He'll be huge in the slot, but he's not just a slot wide receiver.
And he's not short, but he does look small on film.
He's not big. By the way, he has tiny hands and short arms too. So he plays smaller, or he looks smaller than what his 5'11" and a half, nearly 6 feet, 186 pounds. That's not big anyway, but it's not tiny. He's not like one of these 5'9" slot wide receivers.
Well, that would be the same as Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, but he looks smaller than, like, when you're just watching the film, he looks more like Wes Welker. I'm not comparing him, but he just looks small in comparison to if you were to watch Deebo Samuel on film or Brandon Ayuk, and they're all the same height.
Yes, absolutely. I saw him put a cornerback on the ground on a little out route. It was almost like a mini blaze out the way he ran it. Gave him a lot inside, cut back out against Auburn, and the corner fell on the ground on the out route. This is as an outside wide receiver alignment. He could absolutely thrive in the slot, and much like I think one of the comps you see is Cooper Kupp. I think that's much better than someone like Wes Welker if you're trying to go white wide receivers. I love the Brandon Cooks comp because Cooks had that ability to get deep, even though he was not the tallest guy. He played bigger than what his size was and could get to the 3rd level of the field as a receiver, and that's important. And I think Ladd McConkey has that ability. Emmanuel Sanders is a good comp that I've seen for Ladd McConkey athletically. I like that one quite a bit, who was a Kyle Shanahan receiver.
To talk about his speed, and he is a guy at the combine, he ran a 4.39, but when you watch him, just his play speed, because you can run a fast 40 time, and there are guys that blaze. Heck, the kid out of Texas, Xavier Worthy, broke the record, ran a 4.21 or whatever it was. It felt like watching the film, I thought Ladd McConkey actually ran routes faster, like at a faster pace consistently than what I saw from Xavier Worthy. And Worthy was fast. Like, you could see that on film. McConkey played, I felt, faster than even Worthy. Like, just the way just threatening the defensive backs, just the way the speed looked running vertical. And again, he won underneath, and he did those things as well. And he had a good understanding of where to settle in zones. But I watched him in games, watching a game and then evaluating the prospect, 2 different things. But I actually was much higher on what I saw watching the film than what I was initially expecting. And I was watching all 22. And when you feel the speed watching all 22, you got a guy that's really moving.
I don't know if Ladd McConkey is necessarily going to be a yak bro, but he has some punt return experience and it has some finesse after the catch ability. He's not going to be Deebo Samuel or anything like that, but I think he can give you something after the catch. So a complete wide receiver is what I see in Ladd McConkey. And I think he's a big-time player, and I think some teams might have him as wide receiver 4 in this draft. Maybe he's more of a 2nd, 3rd round guy. I don't know for some teams, but I think it might shock people when you hear his name called in the 1st round.
Watch him against Florida and how he caught this ball and then just got the top speed so fast and outran everyone to the end zone. Like, he does have yak bro type of ability as well. And someone in the chat asked, does he block? Like, does that speed block? one of the first plays in the Florida game. He's blocking out on the edge. I said, there we go. More than, and what I'm looking for, are you a willing tackler or are you going to do the whole George Pickens, right? Where he's like, I'm not even going to give any effort blocking. Yeah. He is a willing blocker and a guy that really tries to throw his 5'11", 186 frame around.
And it's kind of like the Yak thing. It's like he does what he can do with what he has, and he gets in the way as a blocker. If you're playing at Georgia, he only had, well, first of all, he had some injury problems. So we got to talk about some of the negatives with him and some of the concerns with Ladd McConkey. We'll get to some of that next, but he's a willing blocker. He'll put his body out there and he'll block as good as he can. He's 5'11", 186, short arm guy. He's not going to pancake guys, but he's going to give effort as a blocker. And I think that's really important. And the way he plays is with effort everywhere. And I love that about Ladd McConkey. I think that's what Kyle Shanahan would like about Ladd McConkey. More on McConkey. Braden Fiske, defensive tackle from Florida State. Mike Sainristill, he's a corner from Michigan. Are they future 49ers? Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more at FanDuel and say goodbye to those busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney, whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed. It's time to go dancing on America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. And if you don't want to bet on college hoops, that's okay, because you can bet on NFL football still as well. 2024 season futures, and of course, those NFL draft props. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. All right, we got to move along to some other prospects here. Finishing up with Ladd McConkey, wide receiver out of Georgia. I mean, he gets a huge thumbs up for me. I love him. Late round 1, early round 2. I think that's the right range for him. I would not be shocked at all if the 49ers drafted him at pick 31. I would be shocked if he went a little bit earlier. I wouldn't be shocked if he went, say, 3-4 picks later to the New England Patriots, say, at the top of the second round. I think that's the right range for him. I think he can be a really good player in the NFL. Production-wise, it was not huge for him, and he was not a productive player. And it was funny because Peter Bukowski, our colleague, host of Locked On Packers, I know Locked On 49ers listeners love to hate on Peter Bukowski, but when you put the Brandon Cooks comp out there, he's like, I see some Brandon Cooks, except for the back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons in his last 2 seasons of college football.
And a dominant year. And he was Blitnikoff, shout out to the Stockton, California guy. But you're comparing, again, when it comes to prospects, most of the time you're not really comparing their production. You're comparing how their skill set translates to the NFL. And if you want to know what Ladd McConkey looks like just how he plays, what it looks like, what kind of ability he has, it just looks a lot like Cooks. And if you, again, you can watch the Florida game. I don't know how many times he was targeted in that game, but you see someone that does well with the limited opportunities that he had. So, okay, yeah, he's not going to be, 1,000-yard receiver all the time, right? You can almost compare it to the 49ers receivers, where people want to compare, Brandon Ayuk to CeeDee Lamb and all these other guys. And it's like, dude, they're getting 50 plus more targets than him. He's doing with his targets what he can. And, you know what I'm saying? Like, you only have so many opportunities. And that's Georgia as well. Like, Georgia, if you let them, they'll run the ball 100 times.
Ladd McConkey, by the way, this season, he only 9 games, had some injuries. He only had 30 catches for 468 yards and 2 touchdowns. And when you watch him play, you wonder how the heck could it be that little of, even in 9 games, how to be that little production. Last year, for 15 games, 58 catches, 162, 7 touchdowns. His biggest production in his college career was 2012. As much. They don't feature him in the passing game as much as they feature, say, their tight end. They run the heck out of the ball. Their quarterback this year, I can't remember who their quarterback was offhand. He threw the ball 200 times fewer than Sean Mannion did to Brandon Cooks at Oregon State back in the day. So it's just a different idea, different amount of targets, and a third of his, so 600 targets for Sean Mannion in Brandon Cook's last season at Oregon State. 600 passes thrown by Sean Mannion, 400 completions, a third of those 400 completions went to Brandon Cooks that year. It was just nuts. It was just all Brandon Cooks all the time, and they threw the heck out of the ball. Georgia's different, so the production's not there, but the tape is fantastic for Ladd McConkey. Do worry a little bit about short arms. He's not the biggest guy, kind of skinny, small hands. He's got pure hands, so I'm not really worried about the hands, but they're not big hands. Does he shrivel in contested catch situations against better players in the NFL? You have to ask that question. But his ball skills are legit. Coming back to the ball, catching the ball off the turf, love that. Tough but not super strong. Battled injuries. With his size, is it something he's going to get hurt a lot if you're asking him to catch a lot of passes inside, get hit a lot in a high volume passing sort of a situation with Ladd McConkey? You have to worry about those things, and that's why he's not going to go high in the first round, and that's why maybe he won't go in the first round at all. But I mean, yeah, tape is awesome. Love Ladd McConkey.
Tape was awesome, guy. I definitely walked away much higher on him than I was going in. Which going in, knew he was fast. I've watched him do some things and stretch the field and do all that. But I was definitely impressed with just watching him and evaluate him as a prospect.
Braden Fiske, he's a combine superstar, defensive tackle out of Florida State. 6 feet and 5/8, just a hair under 6'1", 292 pounds. So when you're a defensive tackle and you're undersized, which clearly Braden Fiske is, you better have a lot of athleticism and burst, and he has that. And Braden Fiske was phenomenal at the combine. Braden Fiske ran 4.78 at 292 pounds at the combine. A 4.37 short shuttle, which is really good. He's a high effort player. He shows upfield burst. He gets his hands up when the pass rush is thwarted and he's not there. Like, he's active from the snap until the whistle. I love that about him. But Croc, we're talking about a guy who's a defensive tackle in the NFL, 292 pounds. He's got 31-inch arms, which were the shortest of any defensive lineman, period, at the combine. And I saw a guy get washed out way too much as a run defender. And maybe stonewalled too often as well. So his combine performance was awesome. I do think, spoiler, I think Braden Fiske, is getting overrated right now because of how good his combine was versus what the tape says. And I want to hear what you say about him, but I'm all the way out of pick 31 on Braden Fiske.
Tony Meredith here says Fiske is 6'4".
He might have been looking at a different Fiske.
Okay.
Maybe standing on a box. He was 6 feet and 5/8 at the combine.
So maybe that's what he was listed at Florida State.
6'4". I wouldn't be shocked by that. Like a couple inches, 2.5 inches, 3 inches. 6'4" is a little much, because I'm even giving him a little bit here. Listen to him at 6'1". If you're watching the podcast on YouTube, he was 6 feet and 5/8.
What I watched was, again, I'm looking for something specific for the 49ers. And one area that I'm really big on trying to improve, right? And we can go back to DJ Jones. It was great having DJ Jones because he was so stout against the run. Heck, I think he was a better run defender than even DeForest Buckner during his time. And obviously we know how great of a player Buckner was. But when you watch Fiske, there's times where he really just gets swallowed up in the trenches. I'm watching the film. I see a double and him try to take on a double. And great, we got to watch Robinson yesterday, and we talked about him, and watching him break through doubles, it gets you excited, man. It gets your juices flowing with how well he does that. Big guy, moving guys. He's really stout. With Braden Fiske, man, I watched him try to take doubles, man. They're pancaking him, and there were times where they ran the ball right at him. And I'm like, oh, where'd he go? Where'd he go? Where'd he go? And then you just see him like underneath the pile trying to peel himself off of the ground. So I thought he could be a little bit more stout. I'd say he was stout every 4 or 5 plays in the run game, where most plays I felt like he was getting washed out of there just a little too easily. And, we saw that with like Javon Kinlaw. And Javon Kinlaw did some good things, but one thing that we saw a lot, kind of get moved out of there, get walled off in certain areas. And I thought Fiske, that showed up on film a lot for me. I didn't know, you said that he's getting a little overrated. So do people have him going in the first round? Because watching him, and I know we're talking about the latter part of the first round, but I didn't see someone that would be, worthy of the 31st pick and me be excited about him. He doesn't like wear gloves and stuff. So I was watching it hoping I see someone that gets me excited, like Justin Smith, the Cowboy. And That's not what I saw.
Tony says he was listed at 6'5" at Florida State, and I was just trying to look up some, and yeah, he was. In the program, they had him at 6'5". Dude, what I saw is he was 6'1" at the combine, under 6'1". On tape, he's small. He's for sure not 6'5", not 6'4". Maybe there's some different listings out there for what he actually was at the combine. For sure, he's undersized. I don't care how tall he is, to be honest with you. He could be 6'3", 6'1", 6 feet, 6'2", whatever it is. He's not big, and he can't hold up against the run. He gets washed out. He disappears behind a wave. And I don't like that at all for an early round defensive tackle interior guy. As active as he is, as fun as he is to watch sometimes with the way he plays, I think he's a rotational sort of a player, a rotational rusher. I'd be shocked if he's drafted in the first round. Croc, he's not on my list for the 49ers at 31. He's a good player. It's not his fault. He worked out so well at the combine, the people started paying a ton of attention to him. I think whatever the tape said before the combine is probably where he should have stayed.
So far, what I'm seeing as far as the combine goes, it does have him listed at 6'4".
I'm seeing a lot of conflicting stuff here that I'm looking at right now. The one I trust, the one I use for everything, had him at 6'1". So we'll see. But he's definitely. I mean, did he look 6'4" on tape to you?
I didn't think he was somebody that looked small. Like, he looked taller than the kid we just watched, war number 6 on the defensive line. We watched him a few days ago.
Johnny Newton was also 6'1". Yeah. Or
okay, he looked taller than Johnny Newton.
Okay, maybe he is 6'4". Maybe the information I'm looking at is wrong. The weight is adding up though, 292. So either way, he didn't hold up. If he's taller, maybe you think he could put on more weight and potentially add to, the sand in his pants potentially. I don't know. I don't think it changes much for me if he is. So I'm going to go deeper into that and find out if that 6'1" is actually accurate for Braden Fiske. Either way, I don't think being taller helps me like him more at pick 31 for the 49ers.
And there were some times that I felt like he kind of won, but you got to be, at least in college, right? Like, and we're looking at how your game translates to the next level. I need either this tremendous pass rusher or this really good run stopper. And when we talked about Robinson yesterday, he did some good things as a pass rusher, but I loved him as someone that could set that edge and be really stout versus the run, consistently take on double teams, just do all the dirty work, especially when you're losing Armstead, a guy who did all of those things for you. And watching Braden Fiske, I'm still trying to figure out exactly like what he could hang his hat on at the next level.
And Darius Robinson, even as a defensive end, is only 7 pounds lighter at the combine, right? So you're talking about a guy who could play outside and is plus as a run defender and could come inside and rush the passer. Is probably a better pass rusher too. So yeah, I'm taking Darius Robinson all day over Braden Fiske. And it's not Braden Fiske's fault. Like, good on him for putting his name out there and blowing up the combine and running really well. And I see high effort and I see some burst from him, but yeah, not even in round, I think round 263 is kind of rich for what I saw from Braden Fiske. So I think, or Braden Fiske, we're talking about a rotational guy is what I saw as an interior defender. So that's tough. That's even tough on day 2 sometimes. Interesting prospects. A lot of people really like him, and I see him in the first round sometimes, late first round, early second, and I don't think I'm in on that. Next, Croc, let's talk about a corner who is another try-hard guy. A lot of effort on today's podcast from these prospects. Mike Sainristil, he is a cornerback out of the University of Michigan. A reminder to everybody out there to check out Locked On Sports today. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? And you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting because they're having fake debates about God knows what. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports channel streaming program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Of course, Croc and I also involved. You will see us on that channel. You'll see me and Matt Williamson on the Peacock Williamson NFL show as well. All the biggest stories, all of the insight from all of the experts here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Last one here, cornerback out of Michigan, Croc. It's Mike Sainristil. Love the way he plays, and I love the way you break down cornerbacks. So tell me what you saw when you watched the film of Michigan corner Mike Sainristil.
I see a true, ideal nickel cornerback.
Yeah.
He's small. He looks a little thin, a little frail, right? And at the NFL level, you play in that nickel spot. You're not just responsible for covering guys and doing those things out in space. And obviously, we want you to have that ability, but you also have to be able to come up and you got to hit it, and you got to be able to fill some gaps. And I thought he was definitely more than a willing tackler, and that's what I'm looking at. Am I looking for someone that's just going to blow guys up? If you can do that, great. But more than likely, you're not going to be a guy who is just going to consistently blow guys up in that nickel, because a lot of times they're a little bit more vertically challenged as their height goes. Watch him come off the edge, timed up blitz well, decleating quarterbacks. Love to see that. In coverage, he has all the ability. When it comes to feet, change of direction, I think he has the ability to run vertically with guys, even though a couple times saw some guys get behind him. I didn't necessarily care for the Michigan defense that they ran. Just a lot of soft zone, and you didn't really get a chance to watch him really challenge himself. Like, I want to see him pressed up, see how he moves with the guys. Is he getting hands-on? Is he more of a motor guy, out of his press alignment? Does he get hands? I wanted to see those things, and you didn't really get a grasp on that. And the tough thing about that, right, like how a college corner is going to translate to the NFL, you don't see a lot of man coverage, see a lot of zone. NFL, you are forced to play man. You play man. Even the heaviest zone teams in the NFL are still playing man coverage half the time. You know what I'm saying? So I would have liked to see more man from him, just so I can really get more of an understanding of how he, is able to match with guys. And typically that's why I really love watching the SEC cornerbacks, because I feel like SEC, they play a lot more man. But as far as just movement skills, ability, scrappiness, having this certain tenacity, loved what I saw from him in the national championship game. All those things for me were positive, but again, a little small, potentially a little undersized. So I think he's a guy that may go third round even, because he's going to play one position and teams don't value the nickel in that way. And if you think of a guy by the name of Diamador Lenore, why is he telling people I'm an outside cornerback? Well, he wants to be valued more and get paid more. But Sainristil, he comes off to me as a guy who is a nickel, will only likely play nickel, likely not going to be an outside guy. And I would have liked to see a little bit more man coverage, but overall, I did like the ability.
5'9" and a quarter, 182 pounds, ran a 4.47 40-yard dash, and you said true nickel. My one phrase scouting report, pure nickel.
Yeah.
First, Mike Sainristil. I mean, he played outside and inside at Michigan, but he's clearly a nickel corner. But I love the feistiness at corner. I think he's got a good break on the ball versus coming downhill versus the run against the pass as well. I saw a lot of off coverage with him, but he was physical at times when he was in press. Lines up outside and the slot. He never put his mouthpiece in, Croc. Is that a negative or a positive? Because if you're gonna go through the process of putting a mouthpiece on and hang it on your face mask, but then not put it in your mouth.
Okay, so trends happen, right? Like, there's these trends, and first of all, I never wore a mouthpiece. I like to talk a lot of trash on the field, and the mouthpiece just getting away. So you cannot find a picture of me wearing a mouthpiece in any game. You'll never see it. But as far as the mouthpiece hanging, first of all, go back a little bit further than that. Odell Beckham. You see a short shorts trend? Odell Beckham 100% started that. And it's like, there's certain guys that can be a little trendy and they can really catch fire. Odell with the short shorts, it caught on. And whether you play football or not, you see a lot of guys with those. Jalen Ramsey, he started the hanging mouthpiece. And if you're a cornerback, you're a guy who's a corner, you've been watching him, you only see corners do this. And that's where it started. So Jalen Ramsey is the trend setter of the hanging mouthpiece that you see a lot of defensive backs do.
As was mentioned in the chat, a 1-5-1 10-yard split, which is really good, short area. And you see the burst on tape. You see the explosiveness at the combine as well. 40-inch vertical, 10 feet, 11 inches, broad jump for Mike Sainristil as well. Really good 3-cone, sub 7 seconds there. 6.99 3-cone and a 4.01 short shuttle. So both fantastic, both amongst the best of the few corners that did run those agility drills at the combine for Sainristil. And at 182 pounds? 14 bench press reps, which is not bad for a guy who's a 182-pound corner who's going to play nickel in the NFL. So, yeah, I'm all in on Sainristil as a nickel. Question is, Croc, I don't know where to draft him. Niners are picking at 94 in round 3. I don't think I pick him in round 2, but he might be gone by 94.
Real quick, man, when we talk about the bench press, that's a good – I hit 14 reps on the bench press, and I was a bigger corner when it came to my that was my pro day numbers. Or that was my junior day numbers. I didn't even do it after my senior year. But I asked my coach one time, like, Coach, man, like, why do we do the bench? Like, what does it have to do with playing football? And he said, Croc, it's more so about how hard you work. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but this is what Coach Speaks told me. He said, anyone can improve their bench press if they work hard. And that's a good testament to, have you been in the weight room? Are you working hard in there? So you see a guy that's 182 pounds and he puts up 14 reps on the bench press. That's a guy I can tell you right now, he is a hard worker. He's a hard worker. So that's a good thing. At least you get to find out a little bit about his mentality from that. Because you're not just waking up hitting 14 reps on the bench press when you're 182 pounds.
Yeah, and you watch the way he plays, and you're not surprised he puts in work, right? You can just tell by the way he plays, and I'm sure he's one of those guys, team captain. Everyone loves him. Probably end up on Harbaugh's team. They're going to draft him before the Niners get a chance in round 3. So there you go. It's going to be a lot of Michigan guys, I think, in Los Angeles come April. So interesting prospects there, and I like them all to a certain degree. It's where do you draft them is the question. Will any of them end up San Francisco 49ers? It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough because you have to draft Sainristil in round 2. Are the 49ers going to go nickel corner round 2? I'm not sure if I see that. Kind of out on Fiske early in the draft. Is he going to still be there later? I have a feeling draft media is maybe higher on Fiske than the league might be, just based on the tape. That's just the feeling I get right now watching him. And Ladd McConkey, you got to take him at 31, or he's not going to be there. Niners going to go wide receiver, Ladd McConkey at 31?
Robinson or McConkey?
Does McConkey play Debo's spot is my question.
No. I think if you think about the Rams, and they run a lot of 11 personnel, but they run a similar scheme as Kyle. You came up in it, but you kind of just tweak it to your personnel. And their slot receiver has been somebody that they highly target, whether it's Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua.
Yep.
And I think if you get a guy like McConkey, like, you don't turn him into Debo, you can line him up wherever, because clearly we saw him win on the outside, we saw him win in the slot, so he can win all over. I think you just kind of change your offense a little bit. Instead of thinking, I have to throw 10 passes behind the line of scrimmage to Debo Samuel per game, now we do more things vertically pushing, even if it's things that just clear stuff out underneath for Brandon Ayuk. So I think there's a clear area. I think the bigger issue, I guess, would be what do you do with Juwan Jennings if you have McConkey, Debo, and Ayuk? And I think Kyle loves Ayuk and sees a clear, Juwan Jennings, and sees a clear role for him.
And you're not drafting a guy at 31 to play Juwan Jennings' role in the offense.
No, you draft him in the 7th round,
right?
Or undrafted like Kendrick Bourne.
Yeah, or day 3, or even the 3rd round maybe, but not at 31, not in the 1st round. So the team that drafts McConkey is the team that runs a lot of 11 personnel, that has 3 wide receivers on the field, that's going to scheme guys open, going to have a lot of slot targets like the Rams. 49ers, 21 personnel. That's why I asked if he's going to be the Debo replacement, because that's who you're drafting. You're either trading Ayuk and replacing Ayuk, or you're re-signing Ayuk and you're trading Debo next offseason. You're developing the guy who's going to replace him. And I don't see Ladd McConkey in those roles, so he's going to go somewhere else.
Don't let him go to Kansas City.
Or LA. LA's already got too many of those guys.
Yeah.
Great fit, though. I could see McVay loving Ladd McConkey. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We appreciate all the everydayers. Appreciate everybody in the live chat. And Croc and I will be back next week breaking down more prospects, talking about everything going on with your San Francisco 49ers right here, Locked On 49ers.